October 2017. Wembley Stadium. A small, stocky Argentine legend pulls aside a 24-year-old English striker and gives him a warning. Not a compliment, not a photo opportunity. A warning. 9 years later, that striker is standing on the edge of a World Cup final. He has broken every scoring record his country has ever kept. He has buried a ghost that haunted English football for 4 decades. And in 3 days, he will walk out in Atlanta to face the one nation that legend loved more than anything on this earth. Because Diego Maradona warned us about Harry Kane. He saw it before anyone else did. He looked at a striker the rest of the world still doubted and identified exactly what would make him unstoppable, and exactly what could destroy him. And everything that has happened since, every record, every heartbreak, every goal at this astonishing 2026 World Cup, traces back to that one strange, perfect encounter at Wembley. This is the story of a warning, and the story of the man who spent 9 years proving it right. To understand why this moment mattered, you have to understand who Diego Maradona was to the game of football. Not the highlight reels, not the controversies, the mind. Maradona was born in October 1960 in Lanús on the outskirts of Buenos Aires and raised in Villa Fiorito, one of the poorest neighborhoods in Argentina. No running water some days, no electricity some nights. But there was a ball, and with that ball, the boy did things that made grown men stop and stare. By 15, he was a professional. By 16, he was playing for his country. By 25, he had dragged Napoli, a club from the neglected south of Italy, toward the greatest era in its history, and he had delivered Argentina a World Cup almost single-handedly. And here is the thing people forget about Maradona. Beneath all the chaos, beneath the suspensions and the scandals and the wild quotes, there was one of the sharpest football brains that has ever existed. Maradona did not just play the game. He read it. He understood goalkeepers, defenders, angles, and habits the way a chess grandmaster understands an opening. When Maradona talked about finishing, about scoring, about the psychology of the penalty box, you listened. Because this was a man who had scored what is still voted the greatest goal in World Cup history, slaloming past half the England team in Mexico City in 1986. Which brings us to the strange, tangled relationship between Diego Maradona and English football. To England, Maradona was the villain of villains. June 22, 1986. The Azteca Stadium in Mexico City. A World Cup quarter-final played in the shadow of war, just 4 years after Britain and Argentina had fought over the Falkland Islands. In the span of 4 minutes, Maradona scored the 2 most famous goals in the history of the tournament. The first, he punched into the net with his fist and got away with it, later saying it was scored a little with the head of Maradona and a little with the hand of God. The second, he collected the ball inside his own half, turned, and ran through the entire England team, beating player after player before sliding it past Peter Shilton. The most infamous goal ever scored, followed by the most beautiful, in the same match, by the same man, against the same opponent. England never forgot. England never really forgave. And that stadium, the Azteca, became a haunted place in the English football imagination. Hold that thought, because the Azteca is coming back into this story in a way nobody could have scripted. But here is what most fans never knew. Maradona had a soft spot for one English club, Tottenham Hotspur. His great friend and international teammate Ossie Ardiles had become a Spurs legend, and back in May 1986, just weeks before the hand of God, Maradona actually pulled on a Tottenham shirt. He played in Ardiles' testimonial at White Hart Lane against Inter Milan, lining up in a midfield alongside Glenn Hoddle and Chris Waddle, wearing boots he had to borrow from Clive Allen because he had not brought his own. Think about that. The man who would destroy England a few weeks later was, for one afternoon, a Tottenham player. So in October 2017, when Maradona came back to London, it was Tottenham he came to see. Spurs were playing Liverpool at Wembley, their temporary home, while the new stadium was being built. Maradona arrived with Ardiles at his side. He waved a navy and white scarf. He spoke to the crowd at halftime. He embraced Mauricio Pochettino, the Spurs manager who had grown up in Argentina idolizing him. And before kickoff, he went down to the dressing room area where he came face to face with the most talked about young striker in Europe, Harry Kane. Now, you have to remember exactly where Harry Kane stood in October 2017, because the world saw him very differently back then. Yes, he was scoring goals. He had 17 for club and country already that season. But Kane had spent his entire career being doubted. This was a kid who had been rejected by Arsenal as a child. A kid who had been loaned out to Leyton Orient, to Millwall, to Norwich, to Leicester, and had never fully convinced anyone. When he finally broke through at Tottenham and won the Premier League Golden Boot, the entire country called him a one-season wonder. When he won it again, they said he was a flat-track bully. When he flopped at Euro 2016, they said he could not do it on the big stage. The doubt followed him everywhere, like a shadow he could not outrun. And the doubts were not entirely crazy. Kane did not look like a superstar. He was not blessed with blistering pace like Thierry Henry. He did not glide past defenders like Ronaldo. He was not built like a tank. He looked, honestly, like a very good player working extremely hard. And English football has a long tradition of falling out of love with exactly that kind of striker. There was always a suspicion that once defenders and goalkeepers got enough film on him, once they decoded his habits, the goals would dry up and Harry Kane would fade back into the pack the way so many hot streaks in English football had faded before him. Which is what makes what happened next so extraordinary. Because the greatest attacking mind in the history of the sport watched him, studied him, and reached the opposite conclusion. And then Diego Maradona, the greatest number 10 who ever lived, looked at this doubted, questioned, endlessly scrutinized striker and saw something completely different. He saw greatness, but he also saw a flaw. And in the moments they spent together, captured on video by Tottenham's own cameras, Maradona did something remarkable. He gave Kane a masterclass. He marveled at Kane's scoring numbers. But then came the warning. Maradona cautioned the young striker against becoming predictable in front of goal. He told Kane not to always go near post with his shots. He told him to go across the goal instead. And then he explained why with the simple, devastating clarity of a genius. Goalkeepers, Maradona said, watch you on television all the time. They study you. They learn your habits. So next time, go across. Stop and think about what Maradona was actually saying. He was not teaching Kane how to strike a ball. Kane could already do that better than almost anyone alive. Maradona was warning him about something deeper. He was telling him that in modern football, every keeper on the planet has watched every finish you have ever taken. Your patterns are public knowledge. Your habits are homework. The moment you become predictable, you become mortal. The only way to survive at the very top, for years, for decades, is to become a striker who cannot be scouted. A striker with no pattern at all. That was the warning. Do not let them figure you out. Hours later, Kane went out and destroyed Liverpool. He scored inside 4 minutes, rounding the goalkeeper Simon Mignolet and keeping his feet to slot home. He added a second before the hour. Tottenham won 4-1, and Liverpool defender Dejan Lovren had such a nightmare against Kane that Jurgen Klopp hauled him off after just 31 minutes. Maradona watched it all from the stands, waving his scarf. 3 years later, in November 2020, Diego Maradona was dead. A cardiac arrest at his home in Buenos Aires. He was only 60 years old. The football world stopped, and among the thousands of tributes, there was one from Harry Kane, who wrote that he was privileged to have met him and that it was very sad news. Rest in peace, Diego Maradona. The teacher was gone, but the warning remained. And what Kane did with that warning over the next several years is one of the great untold stories in modern football. Because Harry Kane became exactly what Maradona told him to become, a striker with no pattern. Watch Kane's evolution after 2017, and you see a player systematically deleting every tendency a goalkeeper could study. He became lethal with his right foot and his left. He became one of the finest headers of the ball of his generation. He mastered the near-post finish and the far corner sweep. He developed a penalty technique so cold, so adaptable, that it became statistically among the most reliable in the sport. And then he did something no one expected from a traditional number 9. He started dropping deep into midfield, spraying 50-yard passes like a playmaker, creating goals as well as scoring them. Defenders no longer knew whether to follow him or hold their line. Keepers no longer knew where the shot was going, because Kane himself often decided at the last possible instant. The results were staggering. At the 2018 World Cup in Russia, Kane captained England to their first semi-final in 28 years and won the Golden Boot with 6 goals. At Euro 2020, he scored 4 times, including the semi-final winner against Denmark, and led England to their first major final since 1966. He became England's all-time record goalscorer, blowing past Wayne Rooney's mark of 53 goals, and then just continuing on and on into the 80s. He became the Premier League's most feared marksman, closing in on Alan Shearer's all-time record. By any measure, Maradona's warning had been heard, absorbed, and weaponized. But there was one wound. One night that threatened to define him forever. December 10, 2022. The World Cup quarter-final in Qatar, England against France. Kane had already scored 1 penalty that night, drilling it past Hugo Lloris, his own club teammate, to equal Rooney's England record. Then, late in the game, with England trailing 2-1, he stepped up for a second penalty. A chance to drag England level. A chance to break the record on the biggest stage imaginable. He blazed it over the bar. England went out, and Kane stood there in the desert night, hands on his head, while an entire country's hopes evaporated around him. For all his goals, for all his records, this became the image his critics reached for. The man who scored everywhere but never won anything. The nearly man, the trophyless wonder. When he left Tottenham for Bayern Munich in the summer of 2023, in a deal worth around 100 million euros, chasing silverware at last, and Bayern promptly endured a rare trophyless season, the narrative practically wrote itself. Harry Kane, they said, was cursed. Except curses break. In 2025, Kane finally lifted his first major trophy as Bayern stormed to the Bundesliga title. Something shifted in him. The weight came off, and he carried that freedom into the 2025 to 2026 season, producing what observers have called the form of his life, tearing through defenses in Germany and Europe at a rate that left even his old critics silent. Former England midfielder Danny Murphy said Kane's remarkable form made a mockery of the old tournament criticism. The striker arriving at the 2026 World Cup was not the haunted man of Qatar. He was something else entirely. He was the finished product of Maradona's warning. And then came the tournament itself, the biggest World Cup ever staged. 48 teams, 3 host nations, and an England side under a new manager, the German tactician Thomas Tuchel, carrying 6 decades of hurt into North America. England opened against Croatia, and Kane wasted no time. 12 minutes in, he scored. When Croatia leveled, he answered before halftime with a pinpoint-powered header, his second of the game, in the 42nd minute. That brace took him to 10 World Cup goals, level with Gary Lineker as England's greatest ever scorer at the tournament. A record that had stood since Italia 1990 was suddenly hanging by a thread. The second group game brought a frustrating goalless draw with Ghana, a reminder that nothing at a World Cup comes easy, which meant the final group game against Panama at a rain-soaked MetLife Stadium in New Jersey carried real weight. Top spot in the group and a kinder route through the bracket was on the line. For an hour, Panama's massed defense held firm. Kane touched the ball just 8 times in the first 35 minutes. The old doubts began whispering again. Then Jude Bellingham poked England ahead from a corner in the 62nd minute, and 5 minutes later, Bellingham crossed from the left and Kane rose above his marker and headed it into the top corner. Goal number 11. The record was his. Harry Kane, outright, alone, England's greatest World Cup goal scorer in history. Lineker's mark, set before Kane was even born, was gone. And there is a beautiful symmetry hiding in that moment. Lineker scored his 10 across 1986 and 1990, and it was Lineker who scored England's consolation goal in that infamous Maradona quarter-final at the Azteca. The record born in Maradona's shadow was broken by the striker Maradona himself had mentored. Then the knockout rounds began, and Kane went to another level. In the new round of 32, England met the Democratic Republic of Congo in Atlanta and walked into an ambush. Congo led 1-0 at halftime, and England stared down one of the most humiliating exits in their history. Here is a statistic that should terrify you. Before that night, England had never, not once in nearly a century of World Cup football, won a match they were losing at halftime. Their only previous wins after conceding first were the 1966 final itself and a quarter-final against Cameroon in 1990. So what did the captain do? He dragged them out of the grave himself. Kane scored twice in the second half, a comeback brace that flipped the match to 2-1 and rewrote 100 years of English tournament history. 5 World Cup knockout goals now, level with Geoff Hurst, the man who won England their only title. Kane also became just the 6th man ever to score 5 or more goals at 2 different World Cups, joining a list that reads Cubillas, Klose, Müller, Messi, Mbappe. That is the entire list. That is the company he now keeps. 3 of his goals at this tournament had come with his head, giving him 4-headed World Cup goals in his career, a total only the German legends Miroslav Klose and Gerd Müller have ever beaten. The one-season wonder was now rewriting the record books of the entire competition. And then came the game that closed a 40-year-old wound. The round of 16. England against Mexico, the co-hosts, in Mexico City. At the Azteca Stadium, the very ground where Maradona punched England out of the 1986 World Cup with the hand of God. The stadium England had not returned to in a World Cup since that day. 60 years of hurt, and now the road to the final ran directly through the most haunted building in English football history, packed with a hostile crowd sitting more than 2,000 meters above sea level, with kickoff delayed an hour by thunderstorms as if the football gods wanted maximum drama. What followed was an instant classic. Bellingham struck twice in 98 seconds before halftime. Mexico hit back through Julian Quinones. Then, early in the second half, England defender Jarrell Quansah was shown a straight red card after a video review, and the Azteca smelled blood. 10 men, nearly 40 minutes plus stoppage time to survive. The ghosts of 1986 circling. And in that moment, Kane stepped forward. His knockdown sent Anthony Gordon racing through, the goalkeeper brought Gordon down, and the referee pointed to the spot. A penalty. At the Azteca, with everything on the line. The same scenario, the same pressure, the same 12 yards that had broken him in Qatar 4 years earlier. He buried it, emphatically. His 6th goal of the tournament, and his 6th career World Cup penalty, which is now 2 more than any player in the history of the competition. Mexico pulled one back from the spot and threw everything at England for the final half hour. 20 shots raining in, England finishing with barely 33% possession, their lowest ever recorded in a World Cup match. It did not matter. The 10 men held. England won 3-2. And as the final whistle blew, English football finally buried the ghost of Diego Maradona in the very stadium where he created it. You could not write it. Except history was not finished writing. The quarterfinal took England to Miami to face Norway and Erling Haaland, the terrifying goal machine who had scored in 14 consecutive matches for his country, 27 goals in that stretch, including all 4 of his World Cup appearances. The 2 best number 9s on the planet, face to face, in brutal 90-degree heat with a heat index pushing 108. And this, if we are being honest, was Kane's hardest night of the tournament. Dispossessed in midfield in the 36th minute, he watched Andreas Schjelderup punish the mistake with a stunning strike to put Norway ahead. Kane thought he had answered before half-time, dinking the ball neatly over the goalkeeper, only for the offside flag to cut the celebration dead. Bellingham had already leveled in first-half stoppage time, and the game descended into a war of attrition. Norway thought they had retaken the lead when Torbjorn Heggem bundled in a rebound, but the video review spotted Haaland shoving an England player before the corner was even taken, and the goal was wiped away. Into extra time they went, and 3 minutes in, Bellingham pounced on a rebound to win it. England 2, Norway 1. Haaland's streak was over. Kane, quiet by his standards, still played every single one of the 120 minutes in that furnace, leading the line, occupying defenders, refusing to come off. England were through to the semi-finals, their 4th in history, their 2nd in 3 tournaments. And now sit with this for a second, because this is where the story bends back on itself in a way that gives you chills. Waiting for England in Atlanta on Wednesday, July 15th, with a place in the World Cup final at stake, is Argentina. Maradona's Argentina. The defending champions, carried by Lionel Messi, the heir to Maradona's throne, who has been rolling back the years all tournament and just conjured extra-time magic to see off Switzerland, with Julian Alvarez curling in one of the great World Cup goals from 22 yards in the 112th minute. Messi sits at the top of the Golden Boot race with 8 goals alongside Kylian Mbappe. Haaland finished on 7. Kane and Bellingham have 6 each. The two most storied rivals in World Cup knockout history, England and Argentina, the hand of God, the Beckham red card, the 1998 shootout, all of it, colliding one more time. And leading England out will be the striker Diego Maradona, personally warned, personally taught, in a Wembley corridor 9 years ago. The apprentice against the master's homeland. The student of Maradona's warning, standing between Maradona's country and another final. And understand what this fixture means in Argentina. England against Argentina is not just another match there. It is history, politics, pride, and Diego, all wrapped into 90 minutes. Every Argentine child grows up on the story of 1986, of the 2 goals at the Azteca, of the day Maradona avenged a war with a fist and a run. For 40 years, that quarterfinal has been sacred ground. And now the football gods have arranged something almost too perfect. Days after England finally exorcised the Azteca, finally won a knockout tie in that stadium, finally laid the hand of God to rest, they are handed Argentina in the semi-final. It is as if the tournament itself refuses to let this story end anywhere else. So what did Maradona actually warn us about? Go back to that Wembley conversation and listen to it again with 2026 ears. Do not be predictable. Goalkeepers study you. Vary your finishing. It sounds like simple shooting advice. It was not. It was a prophecy about what kind of striker survives at the summit of this sport. And look at Kane's 6 goals at this World Cup. A poacher's strike and a towering header against Croatia. Another header against Panama glanced into the top corner. A comeback brace against Congo forged from pure willpower. A penalty under the most suffocating pressure imaginable at the Azteca. Right foot, head, spot kick, close range, pressure moments, comeback moments. No pattern, no tendency, nothing to study. 6 goals, and not one of them looks like another. That is not an accident. That is a man who heard a warning in 2017 and spent 9 years making sure no goalkeeper on earth could ever solve him. Maradona saw the numbers Kane was producing at 24 and understood immediately that this was not a one-season wonder or a flat-track bully. The rest of the world took years to catch up. He warned the goalkeepers of the world. What was coming told them to their faces through a camera that they would be studying this man on television for the next decade. And he warned Kane himself about the only thing that could stop him: complacency, predictability, standing still. Kane never stood still. From the rejected Arsenal kid, to the lone spell journeyman, to the doubted Golden Boot winner, to the man who missed the penalty in Qatar, to the record breaker of 2026 who avenged that miss from 12 yards in the most hostile stadium his country has ever known. 85 international goals and counting. England's record scorer, England's record World Cup scorer, the World Cup's all-time penalty king, and one of only 6 men in 100 years to score 5 in 2 separate tournaments. On Wednesday in Atlanta, he faces the country of the man who saw it all coming. Win, and England play for the World Cup itself for the first time in 60 years, with Kane just 2 goals behind Messi and Mbappe in the Golden Boot race and destiny hanging in the air. Lose, and the story becomes crueler and more poetic still, Maradona's beloved Argentina denying Maradona's own student at the final door. Either way, somewhere, you have to believe Diego is watching. The man who destroyed England in 1986, who wore a Tottenham shirt in borrowed boots, who pulled a young striker aside at Wembley and handed him the secret. He told Kane that the goalkeepers were watching. He told him to never let them figure him out. 9 years later, they still have not. Diego Maradona warned us about Harry Kane. We just did not realize he was telling the truth. Like and subscribe for more football documentaries. Until next time.